Why should the elderly live alone? Many elderly people feel that relying on their children is not something to be ashamed of. Before we delve deeper, I would appreciate it if you could like this video to help me continue sharing important lessons about aging. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and turn on the bell notification so you can stay updated with all of our future videos. If you like this video, please comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 0 to provide feedback so I can improve. Now, let's get started. Many people believe that when children care for their elderly parents, it shows that the parents raised their children well and are successful and capable individuals. There's nothing to be ashamed of in relying on children for support. The elderly benefit from living with their children, knowing that their food, drink, and daily needs are taken care of. However, relying entirely on grandchildren or even on children can sometimes lead to complications. Many cases have proven that, in some instances, depending solely on children is not always ideal. It may be better for elderly people to become more self-reliant as they age. A typical example of this reality is Ms. Lan, who is 75 years old and suffered from a serious illness 2 years ago. After that experience, she realized the reality of her future life in old age. She decided it would be more beneficial for her to protect herself and her well-being rather than relying on her children. But why does Ms. Lan feel that depending on her children is neither useful nor effective as she grows older? What should she prioritize and protect instead? Let's listen to her story for a deeper understanding. Ms. Lan is now 73 years old and has been widowed for 13 years. Before her husband passed away, they had lived a happy life together, with 2 sons and 1 daughter, all of whom had good, stable jobs and lived in the city. Unfortunately, the good times did not last long. 5 years after her retirement, her husband tragically died in a car accident. Since that time, she has lived alone, surrounded by an emptiness in a cold house. Initially, Ms. Lan felt that her health was still good, and with her monthly pension, she believed she could take care of herself even without her husband. After his death, the person responsible for the accident gave her compensation, along with savings her husband had accumulated over the years. However, despite having money, Ms. Lan realized that the rest of her life felt uncertain and meaningless, without the companionship and sense of purpose that family provides. She began to listen to advice from other elderly people, who suggested that she spend her money on food, travel, shopping, or even hire a helper. But Ms. Lan felt that living this way wouldn't be fulfilling, and that it would not truly belong to her. It was then that she came to the realization that, although she once thought her children needed her support, the truth was that her children were often selfish and greedy. After her husband's death, Ms. Lan tried to comfort herself by accepting her children's offers to care for her. Initially, they agreed that she would live with each son for 5 months, and then stay with her daughter for 2 months. They told her she could choose the arrangements that suited her best. However, after spending time living with them, Ms. Lan began to notice that this living arrangement didn't bring her the comfort and happiness she expected. Instead of feeling at home, she felt more like a guest in her children's houses, especially when staying with her son-in-law, who treated her as such. At her eldest son's house, she was expected to contribute to household chores and was given 5 million VND per month to help with family expenses. But over time, he began to complain that her pension was too high and asked her to contribute more. Eventually, he reduced the allowance to 2 million VND, and then nothing at all. The same situation occurred when Ms. Lan moved to her younger son's house. Initially, he treated her kindly, but soon he asked for 200 million VND for an investment project. At that point, Ms. Lan had already spent the money she had on living expenses and helping her older son, leaving her unable to provide him with any funds. Her younger son grew dissatisfied, feeling entitled to her money, and pressured her to sell her old house. He argued that since she only stayed there a few times a year, selling it would be better for her and the family to make more money. Although Ms. Land's late husband had suggested selling the house and living with the children after retirement, Ms. Land refused. That house represented years of hard work, sacrifice, and memories, and selling it would leave her without a home or a place to gather with family. Despite her firm refusal to sell, her sons continued to pressure her. Eventually, to appease them, Ms. Land gave each of them 50 million VND, pretending she only had 200 million VND left. This temporarily calmed their intentions, but she was left feeling deeply unsettled by the situation. Ms. Land thought that now at least she could live in peace. However, things took a turn when Ms. Land suffered a stroke 3 years ago, which left her with limited movement and a need for additional care. This experience opened her eyes to the reality of her situation. Her children, once eager to care for her, now became less compassionate. They started treating her more like a burden and complaining about the difficulty of caring for her. Instead of offering the support and love she needed in her time of vulnerability, her children seemed focused only on what they could gain from her. Ms. Land's story serves as a stark reminder that relying on children in old age can sometimes be fraught with emotional and financial challenges. While some elderly people may find comfort in staying with their children, Ms. Land's experience highlights the importance of self-reliance. Elderly individuals should prioritize their own health, independence, and peace of mind rather than depend on others, especially if it leads to feeling like a burden or losing their sense of security and dignity. The doctor advised Ms. Land to rest and focus on her recovery after her stroke. However, living with her son proved to be challenging. She often found herself scolded and criticized, which only added emotional strain and may have worsened her health. The suggestion to place her in a nursing home was made, but she couldn't bear the thought of it. The idea of being confined in a place where she couldn't come and go freely felt like a prison to her, and she was determined to avoid that fate. Instead, she made a bold decision to return to her hometown, hire a helper, and live independently. At first, her children were hesitant and expressed doubts about her living alone. They thought it wouldn't take much money and they agreed to let her go back home, but reluctantly. Less than a year after returning to her house, Ms. Land's health improved significantly. She regained the ability to walk, her limbs became more flexible, and she could perform simple household chores. Looking back, she realized that not selling her house and not giving all of her savings to her children had been the right decision. Had she given up her house or drained her savings, she would have been left vulnerable, entirely dependent on her children for daily support. She would likely have had to endure their complaints, or, worse, end up in a nursing home. Her story highlights a key lesson for the elderly. It's essential to maintain control over one's life, especially in old age. The decision to stay independent, safeguard personal assets, and avoid unnecessary reliance on children can result in a happier and more peaceful life. For Ms. Land, living alone in her own house allowed her to retain her dignity and live her life on her terms. This is a lesson that many elderly people can relate to. Aging doesn't have to mean losing control. In fact, it can be the time when one gains a deeper understanding of how important it is to protect oneself, both financially and emotionally. As Ms. Land's story unfolded, she came to realize that protecting herself required more than just good health. She also needed to safeguard her financial independence. She understood that relying solely on her children, especially in difficult times, was not a sustainable option. There were moments when her children showed little concern for her well-being, and it became painfully clear that their priorities were not always aligned with hers. For example, after her husband's death, her children had promised to take care of her. They even invited her to live with them for a few months at a time, offering what they called a peaceful and comfortable retirement. Yet, the reality was far from the promise. She was treated like a guest, expected to contribute to household expenses, and forced to follow their rules. In one case, her eldest son even reduced the amount of money he gave her each month, despite her pension being her only income. After a while, she stopped receiving any money at all and had to manage everything on her own. Living with her children became a constant struggle. She endured emotional and physical discomfort as she tried to accommodate her children's families. The situation with her younger son was even worse. He tricked her into lending him a large sum of money for a supposed investment project, and when she could not provide the money, he pressured her to sell her house. When Ms. Lan refused, her sons tried to persuade her to part with the family home, the one place where she had built memories with her late husband. She felt that if she sold the house, she would have nowhere to go. But the pressure continued, and eventually, she gave them some money to appease them. This constant pressure from her children made Ms. Lan realize that relying on them would not bring her happiness. When she suffered a stroke, her children's lack of support became even more apparent. After her health began to deteriorate, they showed little care for her well-being, and she was left to feel like a burden. This marked a turning point for Ms. Lan. She realized that her health and well-being depended on her decisions, not on what her children expected of her. She made a decision that would change her life. Ms. Lan chose to return to her old home, hire a helper, and live independently. This decision was not made lightly, but it proved to be the right one. Less than a year after moving back into her home, she felt better than she had in a long time. Her health improved and she regained some of her independence. Her stroke symptoms lessened, and she was able to enjoy the simple pleasures of life again. She could walk and manage basic chores, something that would have been impossible had she stayed with her children. The lessons Ms. Lan learned during her struggle are valuable ones. In old age, it's crucial to maintain one's health, both physically and financially. Relying on children may not always be the best option, and there are many reasons why an elderly person might choose to live independently. In her case, she found peace in her decision to live alone. Her house, once a place of memories with her husband, became her sanctuary. By protecting her assets and her sense of independence, she not only improved her quality of life, but also avoided being at the mercy of her children's fluctuating priorities. One of the most important takeaways from Ms. Lan's story is the importance of protecting personal assets and maintaining financial independence. She had built her life with her husband, and the house they had purchased together was a symbol of their hard work. To sell it would have been to lose a part of herself. Instead, she chose to keep the house, preserving her autonomy and ensuring that she could live out her years without depending on her children for support. She also made sure to keep enough money for herself so that she would never have to give up everything to her children or be left without resources. There are many families where parents give everything to their children during their lifetimes, only to find themselves without any support in their old age. In these cases, the elderly parents often end up living as tenants in their own homes or relying on the charity of their children, who may not always show gratitude. This is why it's important to keep some assets for oneself, particularly in old age. By doing so, elderly people can maintain their dignity and live comfortably, without having to sacrifice their well-being for the sake of their children's financial gain. Living independently in old age also provides a sense of autonomy. For many elderly people, living with their children can create a situation of discomfort and resentment. Whether it's feeling like a guest in their own home or being forced to contribute to household expenses, the lack of privacy and personal space can take a toll on mental and emotional well-being. In Ms. Lan's case, her decision to return to her own home allowed her to regain control over her life and regain a sense of peace. While living with children may seem like a convenient solution for some, it often brings with it unresolved conflicts and tension. In Ms. Lan's case, living with her children caused her to feel like a burden and left her in a vulnerable position. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that, when it comes to old age, the best choice may often be to protect oneself by maintaining independence and ensuring that one has enough resources to live comfortably. In the end, Ms. Lan's decision to live alone proved to be the right one. It allowed her to reclaim her life, maintain her dignity, and enjoy the freedom that comes with living on one's own terms. Her story is a lesson for all of us, showing that it's possible to age gracefully, with independence and purpose, no matter the challenges we may face. Living with children after retirement can seem like a good solution, especially when parents are in need of support. However, this well-intentioned living arrangement can sometimes lead to dissatisfaction. While the children might try to help and care for their parents, living under one roof with different generations often leads to conflicts due to differing ideas and lifestyles. Generational gaps can make it difficult to maintain harmony. In some cases, maintaining clear boundaries between parents and children can preserve a peaceful relationship rather than create tension. After retirement, parents often expect to be appreciated by their children. However, the reality is that living in their children's homes can sometimes result in complaints or even reproach. Rather than feeling valued, the elderly parent may feel like a burden, especially when the children's lives become busier or more stressful. To avoid this, it might be better for elderly parents to visit their children occasionally, but live independently, helping out when necessary. This approach helps ensure that their old age is peaceful and not overshadowed by the tension of living under the same roof. Another important lesson for retirees is not to overexert themselves working for their children. In today's world, many retirees continue working, taking on extra jobs to support their children or to pay off debts. Some elderly parents even take on household chores and other responsibilities for their children, instead of focusing on their health and well-being. This is a significant mistake. After retirement, the most important thing is to take care of oneself. Health should be prioritized, as neglecting personal well-being can cause both emotional and physical distress. If health deteriorates, it creates a burden not only for the elderly, but also for their children. Therefore, retirees should focus on maintaining their health, exercising, and enjoying life, rather than overworking themselves to help others. No amount of money earned will ever replace the value of good health. As we grow older, it does not mean that we cannot still find happiness or enjoy a peaceful retirement. With careful planning and attention to one's health, old age can still be an enjoyable and fulfilling stage of life. It is essential to prioritize self-care and manage one's time and energy wisely to make the most of this phase. Let's listen to a story that emphasizes the importance of family, self-care, and the changes that come with growing older. In this story, a daughter prepares to leave her mother's house. She checks herself in the mirror, adjusting her clothes and applying lip balm. Her mother, watching from the kitchen, comments on the deep neckline of her dress. The daughter laughs and reassures her, saying times have changed. The mother doesn't say much in response and continues preparing lunch. As they sit together, the daughter jokes about her lipstick, which was a gift from Thailand, and kisses her mother goodbye before heading out. Despite the differences between them, the mother and daughter share a warm, loving bond. The daughter is successful and enjoys a high income, often purchasing fashionable clothes, cosmetics, and accessories. She occasionally brings her mother gifts, though they don't always fit well or meet her mother's needs. Still, the mother understands her daughter's intentions and appreciates the thoughtfulness behind the gestures. When others praise the daughter's beauty, the mother proudly agrees, smiling, "My daughter is truly beautiful." Though the daughter remains busy with her life, her visits have become less frequent. It has been a month since she last visited, and the mother now spends her days on her own. She fills her time with housework, gardening, cooking, and taking care of herself. Sometimes, when exhaustion sets in, she sits by the creek, propping her knees up on the hill and gazing at the clouds. Though her daughter may be busy, she still sends small gifts each week, like health supplements, fruits, and even new outfits. She also sends her mother some sweets, knowing she'll return home soon, with more gifts, as well as a visit full of affection. When the daughter does return, she embraces her mother warmly and expresses her love, saying, "Let me lie down for a bit, okay? Later we can have dinner together. I love you so much." She asks, "Are you tired from school?" Though the mother does not respond. Instead, They lie down together, with the daughter's head resting on her mother's arm. In that moment, the daughter notices how much weight her mother has lost and hugs her tightly. The daughter lightly kisses her mother's arm, a faint bite mark appearing and quickly vanishing. She reassures herself that her mother is still youthful, believing in the external influences that tell her that her mother is still young and vibrant. Throughout their time together, the daughter enjoys drinking hot ginger water that her mother has prepared for her. The mother had soaked the ginger the night before and made it for her, as she always did when the daughter visited. However, there's still some leftover ginger water, and the mother regrets it, deciding to make it into jam with sugar. The daughter, ever playful, eats it with her hands like a child, enjoying it noisily. She asks, "Is it delicious, Mom? Spicy, sweet, bitter, like life?" The mother, shaking her head, says, "Who taught you to speak like that, my child? At your age, you should know better." The daughter dismisses her mother's old clothes, which are kept in a box with buttons stored carefully for future use. The mother insists that saving them is important so nothing goes to waste. "Being wasteful is a sin," she says. The daughter laughs, teasing her mother. "If you speak like that, many people would have been punished by now." This simple exchange between mother and daughter highlights the delicate balance of family life, the differences in perspective, and the inevitable passage of time. Despite the generational gaps, the love and respect between them remain strong, and each one does their best to care for the other in their own way. The story reinforces the importance of not overworking oneself, enjoying life, and appreciating the time spent with loved ones, especially as we grow older. For both the mother and the daughter, the relationship they share is one of mutual care, understanding, and growth, even as their lives take different paths. The daughter looked at her mother with a hint of surprise and asked, "Why do you talk like that, child?" But the daughter said nothing. At that moment, her thoughts were elsewhere, reflecting on the corrupt officials who lived lavishly, embezzling state funds, and wondering why they hadn't faced any consequences. Her mother had a small wooden box that had become glossy over time. It was always carefully locked, and the daughter had seen it since she was a child. Whenever she got curious and tried to sneak close to the box, her mother would warn her not to touch it, telling her she would be given it when the time was right. After a few such warnings, the daughter stopped trying to touch the box, respecting her mother's wishes. One morning, as the daughter was getting her bike ready to leave, her mother asked the usual question, "Will you be home for dinner today?" Sometimes, when the daughter was frustrated or late for school, she would reply, "I don't know yet." But that day she noticed something in her mother's eyes, a quiet plea. With a sigh, the daughter said, "I'll come back. Remember to cook rice and tomato soup with meat stuffing. I'm craving it." Her mother, delighted, promised, "Okay, I'll cook, and I'll prepare some bread for you. Don't eat from street vendors. It's expensive and unsanitary." The daughter hurriedly got on her bike and left, but for some reason, she felt more anxious that day. Time seemed to drag on. She kept an eye on the clock, eagerly awaiting the end of the day. It was the last day of final exam preparation, and by 6 p.m., she still hadn't finished her work. She hurriedly asked to leave and made her way to her bike. As she approached the gate, a flower vendor caught her attention, selling fresh roses. The daughter bought some, intending to bring them home for her mother. When she finally opened the door, she immediately noticed something was wrong. Her mother wasn't waiting as usual. Panicking, she rushed to the kitchen and found that her mother had already prepared the meal. The rice cooker was turned off and the stuffed tomatoes were still warm on the stove, indicating her mother had just turned off the heat. On the dining table was a cup of hot ginger water and a plate of spicy ginger, just as her mother always prepared. But her mother wasn't there. The daughter called out, "Mom, where are you?" Her heart began to race as she ran into the bedroom and found her mother lying on the bed, unresponsive. She tried to wake her, but her mother's hand had turned cold and stiff. Panicked, the daughter called an ambulance. They rushed her mother to the hospital, but it was too late. The doctor told her that her mother had suffered a sudden increase in blood pressure. The daughter was devastated. She had never expected this to happen. Her mother, who had just cooked for her, was now gone. She fainted, overwhelmed by grief. When she returned home with her father and younger sibling, she could barely walk. She went into her mother's room and noticed the wooden box that her mother had kept locked for so many years. For some reason, she couldn't bear the thought of anyone else touching it. She took the box into her hands, found the key, and opened it. Inside, she found a pink knitted scarf that her mother had made for her years ago. The daughter had never worn it, thinking it was too old-fashioned. Under the scarf, she found a child's knitted sweater, one she had worn long ago, embroidered with her name. She also found a notebook with her early writing from first grade, clumsy and childish. Along with these items, there was a golden necklace and a neatly written note, "For my daughter." The daughter was overwhelmed with emotion. She had once mocked the box, never understanding its significance. Now, holding these precious items in her hands, she realized that they were her mother's legacy, a testament to the sacrifices and love her mother had given her. Swallowing her tears, the daughter whispered, "I will live well, Mom. I promise." This moment served as a painful reminder that caring for elderly or ill parents is not easy, and it often requires enduring things that ordinary people cannot bear. Parents grow old with us, and taking care of them in their later years is one of the greatest ways to repay them for everything they have done. Even if we cannot manage everything perfectly, we should always strive to do what we can for our parents. The story underscores a crucial lesson about the importance of managing life in our later years. From understanding how to wisely handle our assets to recognizing the value of personal space and maintaining well-being, the insights shared in this video offer vital advice for achieving a fulfilling and peaceful old age. As we reflect on these lessons, think about the ways we can apply them to our own lives. One key takeaway might be to prioritize health and well-being, not just for ourselves but for those who depend on us. Another lesson might be the importance of maintaining financial independence and securing one's future without relying on others. And perhaps the most important takeaway is the need to care for our loved ones in a way that honors their contributions to our lives. We hope that today's discussion has provided valuable insights that will help guide you in making wise decisions for your own future and the future of your loved ones. We would love to hear from you. What have you learned from this discussion, and what do you plan to implement in your life? Your thoughts and experiences are incredibly valuable to us, so please share them in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and found it meaningful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue creating content that inspires and guides us all. Thank you for being a part of our community.